I know that you're not sharing your regular background because you're down in Mexico right now. And,
I am.
and it's sunny there. It's not in your background there. It looks a little rainy. So I know it's not raining.
Reminds me of Seattle.
So anyway, yeah. But yeah, good topic we're going to cover today on inflation and how it's impacting pay surveys and so forth. So I'm interested in getting into that.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be there's a perfect storm of things happening right now. It'll be how everything pans out 5 years from now.
Right. All right. So before we start, we're going to get started in just about 2 minutes. And so as people join up, so welcome everyone. We're just going to do a couple checks and, as far as all our systems, because we are streaming across multiple locations. Let me go ahead and see what we can do here. Checking on different things. But so you're in Mexico, and Howard's in New York, and Jackson's actually in Alaska. I'm in Colorado. So we're all in different locations right now.
No one
most
knows
of them are cold. And Jackson, I know it gets like super cold in Alaska, right? But you're in Anchorage, so it's a little lower. What temperatures do you get down there?
Yeah, I have some friends that are up north more, and it gets to the -50s, -60s. But here in Anchorage, we're regulated by the ocean, so we generally stay around freezing, which is nice.
Oh yeah, -15, and
yeah,
that's in Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
That's -50, 60. That's brutal.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Does anyone go out?
Yeah, it's generally people that are working up on the North Slope doing oil and things like that. So the type of thing where you can't turn the truck off or else it'll just freeze solid in 10 minutes. So just running all the time.
Wow. Yeah, so yeah, impressive. So all right, so I'm not, can you check on LinkedIn to see if we're broadcasting there, Jackson? I just want to check before.
Yeah, I was in, but you have to register for the webinar. So let me just do that.
So I'm seeing a blank screen. All right, we're about to get started here, and just want to make sure we get through. We're broadcasting appropriately on our different channels. And let me just do a quick check.
Yeah, I see it. Same.
Okay, perfect.
I just see your face though. It doesn't show. Okay, I see me. We're good.
All right, perfect. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get things kicked off here. I'm going to go and share my screen, and we'll start the broadcast. All right, everybody see my screen there?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Rewards Mastermind. And so our big goal here is to bring in some of the recent trends of what's going on in the reward space. So being compensation, benefits, and those other important elements that are never spoken about, such as recognition and work-life balance, everything that makes up rewards overall. And so the intent is to bring those top trends to you so we can all improve the profession as advisors and compensation consultants across the industry. And so a little bit about our broadcast today. We are broadcasting across multiple platforms. And so those that are with us on Zoom, thank you for joining us here. This is a way for us to participate live. But if you're on some of the other platforms, such as LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, then you'll be able to participate through that particular channel. And please add if you have comments or anything, please include them there. If you're here live on Zoom, put them in the chat, and we'll take those questions as we go. So the little introductions here with everyone. So we have myself. My name is Sam Reeve. I'm the managing consultant and founder of CompTeam, and along with me is Howard Nisewitz. Howard is a longtime rewards strategist and also focuses on systems and his deep history in compensation. So we're fortunate to have him here. Also, as part of our team, we have Jackson Brockway, who is our compensation analyst. He's going to be looking at the chat today and taking your questions and participating in the forum he sees fit. So he's getting warmed up. So it's I'm trying to get him more vocal and showing his expertise, because Jackson is brilliant. All right, about our speaker today, we have Justin Hampton, one of our regulars, and Justin is the founder and CEO of Compensation Tool. For those of you out there that might not know Justin, he's been in the industry for forever and has been a leading voice and moving compensation practices forward and ensuring that companies are finding the right guidance there, especially through the compensation tool, which is broadened out to be not just a tool that captures benchmark information, but it also reports that information back out to you as a company. And he's got a lot of new tools in there for looking at the marketplace, in such as Squirrel. And so we're going to talk about a lot of that today. But before we get into that, and Justin will tell a little bit about himself, the main topic today is about wage inflation and how that's impacting pay surveys and how we should be thinking about those inflation and coming into this next year. There's still a lot unknowns, and so we're going to have a great conversation and learning more about what we're seeing in the industry right now. So Justin, before we get started, would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and in Compensation Tool?
Yeah, thanks again, Sam. I really appreciate the opportunity to come back on with you guys. It's always a pleasure. But for those that don't know me, I'm Justin Hampton, the founder of the Compensation Tool. I am a compensation practitioner, have been for about 15 years, and decided that I wanted to try and create something a little bit different. And that is the Compensation Tool, which is it's a salary survey management platform that allows you to load your company data, like your jobs and your employees, and your own salary surveys into our tool, so you can conduct your benchmarking, run several different reports that we have. They're all reports I actually used to develop and send over to our board of directors, our C-suite, our HR managers, and so on and so on. And that's what we've done for the last several years. And then in November of last year, so about 3 months ago, we rolled out a new product called Squirrel. And Squirrel is a complement to your salary surveys. It's not designed to replace them. The surveys do a fantastic job of really telling you what companies are paying employees. What Squirrel does is it tells you what companies are willing to pay. Because what we've done is we actually crawled the 45 or so different job boards, and we are pulling and aggregating all of the job descriptions that actually have the rates of pay listed. So thank you, great state of Colorado, now soon to be New York City, but as well as, every state has a huge wealth of data where we can actually start looking to see what companies are willing to pay. And the really cool thing is, the first cool thing is it's something that we've always done already, kind of as comp practitioners, most likely. But what we can actually show is that it is a tool that will, it bypasses the safe harbor guidelines because it's all publicly available data and it's not incumbent level. Now, this is according to our attorney and a lot of other attorneys we've spoken to. So we always tell everyone, check with your own attorney, make sure they're comfortable with it. But I can show you the companies. I can show you data from 2 days ago. I can show you the actual job descriptions that are posted. It's just a really, really kind of cool new data source. It's not a replacement for anything. It's just a whole other way to kind of look at what it takes to be competitive. And so that's what we've been doing for the last several months, on top of what we've been doing for the last couple of years.
Yeah, I was going to say that gives you a really good sense, though, of what the market is for jobs, today versus, historical survey data, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the really fascinating things behind it is that we do see the wages tracking like what you're hearing in the news for a lot of jobs, not for every single job, but for a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And really what we kind of come back to, and we're like, well, why is that happening? We're not going to see this in the surveys. And that's because, again, the surveys aren't going to show you everyone they're going to show you everybody. They're not going to show you just those folks that were hired. So we're actually able to kind of show what companies are willing to pay, it's a whole different look. But, if you're trying to go out and hire someone right now, it doesn't necessarily matter what people that aren't looking for job are making. You want to know what other companies are paying that particular job, because that's who you're competing with today.
Yeah.
That's what we can show with a kind of more detail than any data source that I've ever seen.
So we're going to dive into that a little bit more in the conversation, but let's back up to the what we're seeing right now. I mean, as far as, and of course we have people on here from across the globe, and they're all experiencing a different type of inflation and in different areas and different types of labor issues that are going on right now because of their practices that are, or maybe it's regulatory versus cultural as well. But one thing I think that we're seeing across the globe is rising prices, and for a lot of things due to the disruptions caused by the pandemic. And we've all heard about the people working at home, some disruptions and the supply chain, resulting in increasing prices. It is also with other types of governmental practices and trying to keep the market or people afloat and pumping money into the economy and so forth has also increased. Had some upward pressure on prices. So can you tell us what you're seeing just overall from what are you hearing, Justin, from your clients and people are using compensation tool and just general inflationary pressures?
Yeah, I don't think we're hearing anything like from our client perspective. I think there's still a lot of what are we going to do? What is everybody else doing? I think there's a lot of uncertainty with how do you handle the market. One of the really interesting things that I have seen is that, I mean, what was it last year? Everyone said 3.2%. Like, you gotta be kidding me. And we're not going to have salary budgets increase 3.2%. And we just experienced like the greatest layoff in history in 1 month. I mean, the economy hasn't returned. You still got a very significant amount of the workforce that has not returned. I mean, it was bizarre that's what came out. That's what was even published. I would have kind of pushed back and said, "Yeah, I'm not releasing this information." And, I think as we move closer to the new year, a lot of organizations realized, we can't do the same old. We're no longer in the same old.
Yeah.
So what we came back and we saw a lot of different companies really come back and do a pulse survey on what pay increases are going to look like. So right now, inflation is at 6.8%.
In the
Mercer,
US?
Yeah, in the US. Mercer, I think, they came back and said 3.2% still. I don't know. I'm sure they've done an update. That's the latest number I have. There's probably one more recent. Pearl Meyer was at 4.2% with their most recent salary planning survey. I think World at Work came back at 3.9%. I've done my own polls on LinkedIn with 300-400 compensation practitioners replying, and the numbers are closer to 4% is what we're seeing for everybody. And one of the things I just think is we're not capturing enough information with those questions. Inflation is 6.8%. How much are you doing for your merit increases? That's a very small picture or a very small piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
Because I'm running a poll right now with another 300 companies that have submitted their information. Only 35% of those companies have not done some kind of broad market adjustment already. So what I would like to see is a survey that says, what kind of increases are you making over the past 12 months? Because I think that's going to give us a much more realistic picture of what companies are actually doing to increase wages. Because a lot of those changes have already happened because, I mean, grocery store workers in Seattle, there was a requisite $2 an hour increase last 12 months. So a lot of those things have already happened. So they're already they're being underreported in the survey, salary budget planning surveys. I don't want to.
Right. And I think there are some reasons for that. I mean, of course, when a lot of these surveys came out, I mean, they came out quite a while ago. I mean, they released or asked people to participate in almost like 6 months ago. Right. And it was a different environment. And there's been a huge amount of movement in the market since then. Of course, that's one thing. But another thing I just want to make sure that we point out for our listeners is really the difference between inflation, which is the cost of living, right? And then than pay, which is cost of labor, typically in most competitive organizations. And so the cost of living, of course, is influenced directly by inflation, and it will it's the cost of a basket of goods and by location, and it can be different by different demographic groups. So if your wages are lower, you have a different basket of goods that you typically purchase. If your wages are higher, you purchase a different basket of goods. And so it can be different by demographic. Now, cost of labor includes the cost of living, but it's typically a lagging factor as that is persistent, because we all know that energy costs and stuff like this will spike and go back down, and will impact the cost of living in one particular year. But for it to impact the cost of labor, it has to be persistent over a period of time to build that in. And so usually it's a cost of labor is a lagging indicator, or has inflation as a lagging indicator in it. So, but what I think that we're seeing right now is the market is moving so quickly. Companies are trying to guess on where they should be next year and make adjustments ahead of time and stay ahead of the game, because what's happened, there's been a lot of resignations. There's been a lot of hiring as a result of people trying to fight for talent, and pay is going up as a consequence of that. So I think that just framing that in our current environment is important. But as far as and what you're seeing, Justin, and just these the budget surveys, there definitely came in low, and we've been hearing a lot of guidance of we need to be more aggressive than that. I'm hearing that as well.
Yeah. And there's a lot of companies that I've spoken to that they're still planning, a 3 to 4% overall adjustment. And I've spoken to several of them and said, well, how do you expect to keep people in place? Because right now, what you're seeing, I mean, it's truly a perfect storm of that we've got, what is it? 0.7 jobs for every 0.7 employees for every job that's out there. So the employees are a scarcity. I mean, there are more jobs than there are employees to fill right now. There's a really tremendously interesting look when you look at how many employees left the workforce in May or April of last year, and how few have returned. There are fewer workers now than there were prior to the pandemic, but there are just as many jobs nearly. And so what's happening is it's creating this squeeze where there's a great demand of jobs and a short supply of people that can actually go in and fill those. And now you put this inflation on top of that, and you really create this just really challenging area or challenging conditions for companies to go out and hire folks and stay within whatever budget they had probably set, because it's an employees market and inflation is moving tremendously high. So in Squirrel, one of the things we can look at when we talk about that cost of labor is, there was an article in USA Today, October 27th, about Starbucks increasing the rates for baristas by $1 an hour or whatever it was. And I kind of thought to myself, I was like, is it really that hard? I mean, so we pulled up Squirrel and just did a report for baristas. And what Squirrel will do is it will take all the job postings. So we've got 10,000 postings for baristas, so going back from March of 2021. And we can actually track, it's like it was $26,500, so roughly $12.75, $13 an hour back in March. And it has crossed $30,500 a year. So it's gone from about $12.75, $13 an hour to about $15 an hour in 9 months. Right. And so what I think is really interesting, that's much more closely aligned to what you're seeing with the inflationary numbers versus what we're seeing kind of like, if you look at the Department of Labor, they're suggesting that workers are earning 4.7% more than they earned last year. But that's not for every job. That's, for some hourly jobs, but we can actually look at, and pinpoint what's it cost to hire people, because now that's one of those really interesting things. And a lot of it's being driven by, the lack of demand, supply, but also kind of the inflationary periods that you've got. The other thing that's just fascinating is looking at how many people have quit in the last 10 months.
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's I think that's what's another thing that's driving the market, as you mentioned, Justin. And as a lot of us comp practitioners out there and owners of companies know, that it costs more to hire people or attract them to come work at your company than it is to keep the people in their seats at your company, right? Because of course, when a person is looking to move from company A to company B, they have no idea what they're getting into for the most part. They know that they don't know their manager, they don't know the company culture that well. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns, and so they demand a premium, a risk premium, right, to move from one company to the next. And so that is an increase that translates into an increase in pay. And so when we look at our pay surveys, it tells us, one number, and that's the number to keep people in their seats. But what we're actually experiencing from a recruiting standpoint is something that could be 5 to 10% or even 15% above that number to attract a person to come in and work for your company. And so that can cause a whole lot of issues. But it's important for us to understand that there are two different numbers that we're dealing with when we're trying to attract people versus retain people in the organization.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the interesting things, that the part of the inflationary trends are really, strongly influencing, because, if you went out and hired someone 6 months ago, and they get a 3% bump this year, or maybe it's a 1.5% bump because you prorate it based on how long they've been at the job. That means they can go else. I mean, if it's a barista, for example, they can go somewhere else and make 10% more off the bat.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really interesting from my perspective, is how that is impacting, people's willingness to stay in a particular company. Because, heck, if I can go make 10% somewhere else, what's going to keep me in the seat? And it can't be just the pay. It's got to be the culture. It's got to be, the kind of job management. There's so much that goes into it that you guys, you're intimately familiar with that stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that is the armament that companies need to do to fight against this inflationary pressures, is saying, okay, well, these are the rewards that we provide that are beyond pay. That think about, the reason why you work here is not just pay. It's because of the people. It's because of X, Y, and Z. It's because there are great benefits, because what we do as our company mission. So those are the pieces that we need to be actually careful about in communicating to our employee group, our workforce, to ensure that we can help with that retention in those issues.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I was, it's funny too. Yeah, I was saying it's a job seekers market right now, just because there's more jobs than there are people. Just for context, we're at 0.7 right now. That's the lowest it's been since prior to 2000.
Now, when you say 0.7, Justin, what do you mean there?
Sorry. Yeah, there are 0.7 workers for every job.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's never been a greater shortage of workers than there are today.
Yeah.
And then when you couple that with the inflation, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point, because I've been hearing a lot of, a lot of workers are just fed up with, they were, if we imagine what's been going on, they've been stuck at home, not being able to travel, and see family and friends and so forth. And now the world is opening up a bit. I'm not saying that the pandemic is over by any means, but the world is getting used to that. So they're trying to get some elements of getting back to the normal. I've heard more people talk about gap years than ever before. And so what a gap year is, especially in the United States, is typically when a high school kid goes through high school, and then it's often thought that they're going to take a gap year between high school and they're getting started in college. Well, now a gap year has taken on a new context. Gap year is now, and when you've been working in your job and the pandemic has hit, and you're like hey, I need to take some time, some personal time, and work is crazy. They don't know what they're doing, and the industry is crazy. So I'm just going to take some time for myself and maybe see family or travel and just reconnect with life. And so that's been a big issue that's been taking people out of the workforce. So it's a big trend that's going on right now. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, it's not helping. It's not helping the inflationary pressures as we're trying to hire people, and there's less products on the shelves and so forth as that trend is bucking against all of that, right?
Yeah. Companies really need to start rethinking, their value proposition and what they're offering to keep and retain employees. So, we've been stuck, if you go back historically, in this 3.5% merit budget range for so many years. And it's like, as Justin said, the whole world has changed. You need to think differently about what you're offering. But, there's been these patterns of being stuck, and the surveys are lagging. So you really got to say, what is it that we're going to offer to, keep our employees? And
right.
I think that's a hard thing for organizations to start, changing their direction. But the result of avoiding it is that you're going to continue to face resignations.
That's right, and I think the winners and losers of companies in this environment are going to depend upon how much or how well they've established their workforce experience in the past. So and how flexible and agile they're going to be for the future, and how they're handling right now. So there's where the big topic of what we're talking about is wage inflation, and how should we think about this, and looking at pay surveys and pay policy for next year. And the reality is we can only do what the company can do, right? So if there are situations where companies have very limited funds because of the type of industry or business that they're in, and they may not be able to be more aggressive with to address those pay issues. And then there's others that are highly competitive, and they're willing to invest more. So I guess there's a big range of what I am seeing as across our client group and practices. And so, and I think Justin highlighted some of those, starting out with some of the ones that are under pay pressure or financial pressure. They're still thinking in the old mindset that, hey, we can't afford these large inflationary increases, so we're gonna go with that 3 to 4% budget increase as we've done in the past, and cross our fingers and try to increase practices or improve our practices so we can survive in the long term. And then others I'm seeing are being extremely aggressive, and especially in the technology side, when we're seeing that some pay for certain positions are just skyrocketing, and they're being much more aggressive towards the 7% area, or in some elements are even higher, depending on how aggressive that they want to be and where they're located at. And so there's a lot of differences in practices. And I think that the one thing that is going to happen, this is all going to come out in the next few months. I think by July, we're going to be able to see what a lot of companies how they've reacted to the market as those the pay cycle goes through at this currently through March.
Yeah, and I'll be curious too. I mean, I know that a lot of companies close their books in October, and bonuses maybe pay out, after that, or, sure, whether it pays out in October or November or December. But I'll be curious, like a lot of other companies close out their books in December. They follow a calendar year. So I wonder if there were a lot of folks that we're waiting for that last bonus to put in their resignation for the next. So if the month with the greatest number of resignations is, still coming, because maybe it's going to be in March or April after bonuses have paid out for, the calendar year, or, maybe it's in February, just how the calendar works. So I'll be really interested to see how that goes, how that comes.
Yeah. And that's another trend. I mean, we've talked about in the past about how there's bonuses are moving away from the annual cycle to the quarterly cycle, but not still the dominant. I think 70% of companies are still doing an annual bonus and so forth, or more. And so there's still that big impact of waiting for the bonus before they decide to leave the organization. So I think that we might see an increased turnover, like you mentioned. So Justin, So that's very important. And one thing I want to acknowledge here, Kevin mentioned in the chat about the importance of leveraging the HR business partner to ensure we know, why people are leaving the organization. We've talked, especially on another forum, the People Strategy Forum, over the past several months, about the importance of stay interviews and understanding the other factors that are not just pay. The reason for why a person might be leaving your organization. Also, it's a great idea to give your high potential, high performing people that extra attention and letting them know, hey, we do care, we do want you here, you are important, and so forth. So excellent comment there. So, but back to the pay issues and inflationary pressures. I think that there's just a lot of elements to look at. And what I would encourage companies to do is to do an analysis on what's going on in your particular market. I mean, just recently, Jackson and I were doing a study to understand the migration of people and employees out of the West Coast and how they're spreading across the nation, which is really interesting, because what's happening, we were looking at a variety of surveys, but we're seeing that pay across the nation is increasing, at a higher rate. So not just what I'm trying to say is that when we're looking at jobs across your company, it's important to understand that inflation is going to impact, and the cost of labor is going to impact those jobs differently at different rates of time. For instance, Justin was just talking about baristas, and Jackson and I were dealing with talking to a client earlier that has a sharp increase in driver pay. As we know that we're delivering packages all over the globe right now, and so there's a huge demand for drivers, right? But your financial analysts, your accountants, and so forth, they may not experience the same type of increase. And so it's important to take a close look at your company and understand the impact on different jobs.
So if you were an organization that's looking to retain their current employees but can't match the large inflationary pressure, what's going to be your most important considerations? What should you be posing to your employees to see what you can do to keep them?
There's one thing I hear a lot from a lot of folks is, well, we didn't adjust our salary structures this year because the inflation is high. To me, I kind of think like, well, that's ignoring the fact. Adjusting your pay structure doesn't cost you anything. Adjusting your employees does, but there's no reason that you can't actually make an adjustment to your pay structure to recognize and acknowledge what is happening in the market, because that's what's going to give you a really good sense for the employees that are under market, the jobs that are under market, what your salary surveys have done as the market pricing, how that has changed as a result of market data. You can come back and change those things when you have budget. But I think if you just kind of ignore it and don't make any updates to your pay structures, you're only doing yourself a disservice. It's going to last for quite some time, because just because you don't update your ranges doesn't mean the jobs don't continue to increase in the market value, and you're removing your ability to understand what the market rates are for those jobs. I would say it's probably this is the time you would absolutely want to update your ranges, and then communicate like, how are we updating it? You don't have to move everything up. You can stretch them out. You can be creative with how you update your ranges. You don't have to adjust the minimum, but you should at least update the midpoints and kind of move those along to where they need to be, so you can at least reflect what's happening in the market, and then update your market matches, and then align those jobs to your new pay grades. Because I can show you jobs that have increased, tremendously, and I can show you jobs that have increased 2 or 3%. But if you just kind of ignore it, you are cutting yourself off at the knees, because now you don't know where the issues are going to be, especially the big ones caused by inflation.
Right. Yeah, that's a good advice there, Justin. And of course, I think one of the pieces that companies are dealing with now is like, well, geez, we're completely transparent with our ranges now. Everybody's going to know that we're under market, and of course, that's a concern that you might have to deal with. I mean, but it's definitely important to understand that your pay structures is an administrative tool to understand where you are competitively to the market and what your internal pay policy is. So I would definitely recommend that way. But to expand on this question, another piece is, what do we do if we can't afford it? Well, it's just like the same thing. If you lose your job, maybe you need to cut back on going to movies so often or eating out or at those fine dining restaurants. And so it's like, we need to think about the scarcity of cash, right? And so we need to do that in our organizations as well. We need to differentiate our talent and think about, okay, and just as another example of this, and to give you another example, what the human body, right? When the human body is under stress, or if we're in that cold environment, it does things to react to protect. Like for instance, if you get cold, your skin starts your body narrows those blood vessels and keeps the heat into the core and in your brain, so you continue to function, right? So that's the way the body naturally reacts to stress in situations. You have to do the same thing as a business. You need to understand what are the strategic and core functions that we need to have in place competitively to survive and to continue providing that exceptional service for our clients and customers. You define that, and those other pieces you might have to become less competitive in. So you have to differentiate your talent and focus on your core and your strategic objective. And those are the areas you need to continue to be competitive in as you take away those areas that you can afford to be less competitive in.
Good point. Otherwise, you're putting the whole company at risk.
That's right. And you freeze to death. So yeah, you definitely need to think of your organization as a living organization too. So yeah, definitely.
So we had this question come in through the Q&A, and we kind of hit on it, but it says, how do you educate and convince your managers and employees that as a company, we can't afford to pay inflation rates globally? All costs have increased. So it's more about the conversation between the employer and the employee and the managers.
Well, just one thing, and then if I could jump in here, Justin, real quick. There's been time after time during the pandemic where honesty and candor with your employee group is shown to be hugely beneficial. So every employee, every person understands when there's stress and understands that a company needs to do what it needs to do to survive. So there's countless examples where companies that say, hey, well, we're come to a situation, we're either going to have to do a employee layoff, or we need to have a reduction in the amount that we're paying people, and it can be temporary and so forth. I mean, there's been situations where employees have decided to take extra time off, or to allow less stress on the business so it can recover. There's been situations where people have willingly given part of their pay to another colleague in situations. So there's tons of examples here where candor and clear communication has saved the day for companies.
Yeah,
but it really depends on, and so it really depends on your level of trust that your company is established with your employees. I'm sorry, Howard, go ahead.
I've seen that before too, where senior management decides either not to take pay increases or bonuses, or take hits, so that they can reward and do increases for the employee population. That is such a strong message to the company. I mean, who wouldn't want to work for a company where you feel like senior management is really looking out for me?
Yeah, that's right. And what does it communicate? So if you're in the leadership team and you're saying, hey, we're not going to give pay increases to everybody else, but we're going to take our bonus. That's
a message.
Yeah, that's not a great message, right? So it really depends on your company's culture and how cohesive your leadership team is in doing the right thing for the overall company and people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think, there's a bit of creativity that can come into play. There are some limitations on what we can do, but there's a heck of a lot of creative things that we can do as well. I mean, one example that in full disclosure, I've floated it, but I've never gotten anyone to approve it or do it. But I still don't know why. I think to me, it's a great idea. I've worked for companies that have had salary freezes, and a 3% of your pay is equivalent to how many days of PTO? Like 4 days, 3 or 4 days of PTO, or
yeah.
So it would be like 3% of 2080 is, what is that, 60 hours?
Yeah.
That's like, is that right? Am I thinking?
Well, we can do the math, but I get where you're getting at. So it's,
but yeah, why not provide non-cash based, not incentives, but benefits to employees? If you can't afford to hit those rates of pay, let people accrue PTO to a greater rate. If you can't increase the merit budget, look to provide retention bonuses, or have those stay talks with employees. You're not going to be able to keep everybody, but you certainly can make the effort in a very targeted manner to keep the employees that you have to keep, that are keeping the wheels on the bus. You can go about it with a very kind of surgical precision, with a limited budget. I've seen lots of companies do that, and when they either miss target for bonuses, or they've got pay freezes. At the end of the day, you can't put yourself into the spiral of death where your top performers can go make more. And to Kevin's point, asking employees what they want.
mm-hmm.
The caution with that is, if you can't give it to them, then then you've kind of opened yourself up. But I think it goes back to Sam's point of being very transparent with folks, and kind of understanding you can do it in a blind kind of survey, and then decide which of those things makes the most sense for you. I think you just need to be prepared to address the things that employees are asking for as best you can, as they're asking for those things.
Yeah. And that's another thing, is just as far as one trend and work life right now is the more humanistic approach. And so I would encourage companies to reach out with and actually have those conversations instead of sending a survey. Surveys can be a great way to understand the group effort, and you can use those, and that can be one element. But I would recommend that your high performing people, they deserve that face-to-face conversation and getting that information from them. And you as an employer will benefit from that greatly, understanding, giving them that higher touch, and then also understanding their unique needs, because it's not the same for everyone.
Yeah. And I think that humanistic point too is, unless you're really good at spinning things, or you can sincerely kind of point out the benefits of stuff, I would be pretty transparent and open with employees. Don't tell people the sky is falling or anything like that, but I think you can have an honest conversation with a lot of employees. Now, not all, certainly, but I think, a lot of folks are able to manage that information in a very mature way. Maybe you cut that off at a certain level. Certainly you want your managers to be able to manage that and cascade those messages. But I do think, how you deliver the message and the transparency and sincerity that you deliver it with is very important.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jackson.
So we do have some questions coming in, and they are both kind of to the same tune. The first one being some points of views on ethics when you're paying below the median for positions in their field, and then you hire somebody on and they're hired on closer to the median. How do you, the question says, as an example, a data engineer in their position for over 10 years within the same company, however, they are not being paid at the median. If this employee left and had to be replaced, the new hire would more than likely be paid at the median or above. So how do you address that?
Yeah. That's a great question, and that happens a lot across organizations. So the first thing is that when you're thinking about when a long-term employee starts falling behind in the range, they need to have that extra attention to move them forward. And companies and managers should do the right thing to ensure that they're an employee advocate in this area and not rely on the employee to be a self-advocator for doing the right thing, right? So we need to, as companies and managers, we need to elevate our ethics there. I totally agree in that. So what typically would happen is we want to ensure that you understand what the comp philosophy is. Do you pay for performance? Do you pay for competency? Do you pay for tenure? Tenure might not be part of that equation. And so the first thing you would say is this person that is still below the range, if we don't pay for tenure, or if we pay for tenure, let's move them above the range. If we don't pay for tenure and we pay for competence in the job, is this person fully competent? If this person is fully competent, then they should be at least at that midpoint. If they're highly competent, they should be above the midpoint. If we're paying for performance and that's part of our element, then we need to think about where that person is performing either that year or in the long term and where they should be positioned in the range. So there is a lot of things to consider, and it needs to ensure that it aligns with your compensation philosophy at that company, and it should be documented what that is.
I was once working for a company, and they had, I think it was their QA or their customer service, I can't recall which, but it was an hourly non-professional role. And for some reason, everybody in that role was like between a 0.8 and a 0.85 comp ratio. And people never left. I mean, like people were just in that role for years and years and years and years. So there wasn't really much of an attrition issue, but when someone did leave and they went out to hire, it was quite the shock when every single candidate they talked to was asking for market rates. They said, well, oh shoot, well, we can't pay that because everyone else is at a 0.8, 0.85 comp ratio. So it created this really strange dynamic where they basically had positioned themselves to be paying 20% below the market, even though compensation was saying that's not what you want to do. That's not the rate. But they had to make a decision of like, well, we got to get someone in the seat. There's no one we can put in the seat that's going to come on board, to maintain internal equity. So we need to go out and hire someone. So what we ended up doing was, hiring the person that we thought that was the most qualified for the role, and then coming back and doing market adjustments for the other employees, which, I mean, really, it was expensive, but it's something that should have been done over the years. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why some of these pay transparency things are, such a nice thing that started happening. A lot of employees can't even see their ranges. They can only see their salaries. There's this asymmetry of information. And when you have a lot more pay transparency, it actually forces a lot better of a compensation program because you don't have a full set of employees at 0.8 comp ratios. That's going to make it impossible for you to hire someone and maintain internal equity. Mm-hmm. It's potentially more expensive, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do, and actually ends up saving you money in the long run when you factor in kind of keeping employees, actively engaging them, reducing your turnover, improving your recruitment rates. But yeah, I mean, it's nuanced and it's challenging and it's potentially a hard sell, but if you keep it up over time, it puts, especially when inflation jumps 7%, right. Now those employees are, 30% below the market versus, 20%, which is crazy.
Yeah. Other things to consider. I mean, right now we know that compensation compensation is a number. It's something that we can track very easily. What's more elusive is a company's total reward strategy and their culture. Putting a value on that is quite difficult. And so sometimes organizations can afford to pay lower in the range because they have an outstanding employee value proposition. They have great managers. I mean, it could be in a situation where they can pay lower in the range because you just offer so much and other types of benefits and rewards. But one thing for us to all remember as part of companies is there's a competitive range of pay. And, there are those companies out there that pay at the 10th percentile, and there's companies that pay at the 90th percentile. And sometimes it can be absolutely horrific to work at a company that pays at the 90th percentile because they have to pay that amount because everything else is so hard. Right. And then it can be a complete joy to work at a company that pays at the 10th percentile because everything that they have is so cool. So it's hard to judge, without knowing the culture and the total rewards piece of where people should be. But it's important for us to pay within a competitive range. We don't want anybody to be facing or making sacrifices for their, in their family life because they're working at a place that's so cool. And even though that doesn't give them any kind of promotional increases or whatever, I think that's taking advantage of your employees a bit. You want to make sure that you're within a healthy competitive range.
Yeah. And Sam, kind of on that, I want to, talk about one other thing too, that I think is really important for companies getting ready to start their merit process. And that's really kind of how do you differentiate high performers and average performers? So I ran another poll on LinkedIn with the several hundred participants, all comp people. I think it was like 500 participants. And the majority of them said that if you've got two people with the same salary and the same job, the difference in pay from a high performer to an average performer is up to 150%, which to me is like, that's 4.5% versus 3%. And if you kind of do those numbers for someone making $50,000 a year, that's an extra $750 over the course of a year for your high performer versus kind of an average performer. And, someone, to me, if you think of a high performer, let's just say they work 10% more, like they work 44 hours a week versus like an average performer working 40 hours a week. When you break it down at a per hourly rate, that high performer is earning considerably less than your average performer. And I think this is going to be something that if you think of how much the cost of labor, what the labor market is doing, what inflation is doing, the fact that companies are desperate for employees, I'm really concerned that a lot of companies aren't going to properly differentiate their high performers from their average performers through their merit planning cycles. And I think even when you look at the surveys, to try and tie this back to the primary thing, a lot of that's not going to be reflected either because the surveys, they lag, but they're also looking at kind of what everyone's making. So I'm wondering kind of what are you seeing and kind of how are you guys approaching, the salary increase in the merit budgets for folks? I think it's just something that's so incredibly important, but so often overlooked. And it's just going to be more and more important this year.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. So the one thing I think that in the United States, we've been talking about as far as the inflation and pay surveys that we were talking about in the U.S., as we mentioned before, the inflation rate's been so low that at 3%, nothing's been happening. It hasn't been really taking it as a big impact on your pay structures and so forth. Matter of fact, that the strategy of leading the market or or lagging the market or having a lead lag strategy, as we've learned in compensation school a long time ago, it has really been non-existent for the past 10 years because 3% is within the error rate of a lot of surveys. So why bother adding another percentage on that's just going to be for glamour, right? But now it's different, right? So that we've seen a significant increase in pay, potentially that transferring over into the cost of labor that could be baked in the long term, where we need to start adding those mechanisms back into play this year. We need to start thinking about, hey, do we want to get ahead of this problem, what we think this problem may be, and having a total lead strategy? Or do we want to, or if we can't afford it, we're going to be on the lag side? Or if we want to split the difference and see where pay is going and pay it more conservatively, we can have that lead lag. So definitely bring those pieces back in. This is a year for it.
And where possible, we tell companies, you, in your example, Justin, to tell someone they're an exceptional performer and say, oh, congratulations, you're getting 4% versus the 3% that everyone else is getting. Well, that just doesn't sit well with folks, especially in the market today. So it really becomes, can the company further differentiate and make funds available to really truly reward those exceptional people? I think one of the issues firms have, though, is that you can't have 30% of your population is exceptional. So firms first have to say, let's really define who is truly exceptional, and then we need to deliver the right message to them if they can afford it.
Yeah. So anyway, we've talked about a lot of things today, but we are coming to the top of our hour. So Jackson, if there's some other questions that are come in, please let us know what those are. And if you have questions, remember, if you're on one of those other platforms such as LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, please leave your comments there. We can capture those and get back to you. But if you have any questions more for Justin, please put those in.
There is one question that came at the beginning of the session while we were talking about Squirrel. It says, for smaller companies less than 1,500 employees, can this tool be used to benchmark jobs as they are created instead of participating in surveys?
You can use it to check the rates of pay for jobs. One of the things that we really don't recommend doing is that it replaces survey. And we've designed it's $3,000 a year for companies that have more than 100 employees. So it's really designed to be very affordable. But we don't want it to replace a survey because, again, it's a different data source. It shows you what companies are willing to pay, but not what they are paying. And I think that's really, really tremendously important when you are benchmarking your jobs. What's kind of nice too is you don't actually have to get rid of anything to get it. So it's an add-on product, not a replacement product, I would say.
Another thing that I would have to say as a cautionary point is that not all companies are putting their full range of pay into their job descriptions. Some companies are just putting the lower half of that range, so between the midpoint to the minimum. And so it's important to know that information is directional, and but
Yes.
use it wisely in the context that's intended.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Any other questions there, Jackson?
Nope. I think that is all the questions that we have currently.
All right. Well, so Justin, if people want to learn more about Squirrel and what its capabilities are, I mean, what should their next step be?
So it's we got some information on it. There's a little video. It's comptool.com/squirrel. Or feel free to just reach out to me. I'm happy to show anyone who's interested. We'll get you set up. But yeah, it's as an actual comp person and not like a salesperson or anything like that. Like, it's generally one of the coolest things I've ever played with. From what you can do with it, like just kind of the way that the trends work. And then right now it's primarily US based. We released an update over this week or over the weekend. So we've made some improvements to it. We've got one of the things I'm super excited for in the next 4 to 6 weeks, where basically it'll be Squirrel 2.0. Which will have interactive filtering, some really, really advanced reporting and analytics tools kind of powered by Tableau. And then we're going to be rolling out international data as well. So it's going to be pretty amazing with what you can do with that and the level of detail you can get behind it. So yeah, well, we do have a charge for it. So I'm not sure what a chargeable service is.
So perhaps aside, if you could explain your question a little bit more, but as far as can a person take pay via credit card for the service? Or is that a subscription based?
Yeah. So for companies over 100, it's $3,000 a year. It includes 2 licenses. For companies that are pre-IPO, privately held, it is $1,500 a year if they've got fewer than 100 employees.
Great.
And for everyone else, I did link that 5-minute video in the chat there, so you can click on that and go check it out.
Great. Perfect. Thank you, Jackson. All right. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for spreading your wisdom today and on this topic. So I really appreciate it when you come on and enlighten all of us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, likewise. Really, really great to be here. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you everyone for joining us here at the Rewards Mastermind. We'll see you next month on the Rewards Mastermind. Join us. We're here every month, and so great to talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.